So we'll try to do that. And I think I've worked with most of the people who are on the dais, and I know their sincerity, their unity of purpose, their commitment. And this is a big challenge, and that's why we need governance. Normally people feel that people in the government are not so good people. But I have worked with many of them in parliament, in the government. I can tell you, most of them have very sincere and genuine intentions. What happens then is not able to deliver it as much as we want to deliver is because of the systems. Because the system is such that we do not allow a person to bring his intention to fore. And that is what governance is all about. How to make sure that the genuine good intention ideas can be put into reality in the realm of the system. Because that is another thing. Because government, you have to work in system. That's obvious. You cannot have a government in which we'll do one person in one desk will do something, second desk will do something completely different. That is not possible. So you need to bring in some unified ideas, uniformity of ideas. At the same time, how do you bring in this well-intentioned ideas to reality is a challenge. And therefore I think these 100 ideas would actually be coming out with those basic framework. So I'm sure it will like to work on that. I'm sorry, I requested my colleagues that I'll speak first and go only because there are so many things happening, and we have a cabinet also in the next few months. Before that I have to attend some more program. So I wish to congratulate him, and I'm sure we together our endeavor would be to how to improve literally the governance. And I think that way, one good part is that across the spectrum, people are now focusing on governance. People feel that we have to improve governance. So there is becoming some sort of a priority and sense of urgency that is coming in. But only saying that we want to improve governance is very abstract idea. So this particular book will ensure that is to bring abstract into reality. What is that it means by that is something this book will able to tell us. So I am really happy that you are doing it. I'm very happy to see so many of you, such large number of people interested in the subject. Not only subject, of course, for a respect that you have for the author. So I'm very happy that all of you are here, and I will share with your feeling for him. I also got equal respect for him, equal love for him, and I'm sure he will continue to keep writing and making sure that this idea that he has put forward, he will use some sort of his power to implement it. I think my good friend Shakti, he has a Shakti also, so that's why Shakti. But he can actually, this institution of this Nehru Library has seen so many trigger for change. We have seen in very hall that we are sitting, we have had so many programs which led to so many changes subsequently. So I'm sure this is a very good venue. Shakti is the right person to pursue this. We'll actually take it forward and make it happen. So thank you very much. Congratulations.
While the ministers are escorted out, let me take a few minutes of your time. First, of course, to request you to put your mobiles on the silent mode. We had 2 very loud rings in the last 3 minutes. The other is just to briefly tell you what we do in this place, because many of you are not. We do have a set of regular visitors. I can see many of you are not. As I was saying, we have our own senior faculty who do research. Our senior fellows, and our junior fellows, equivalent of professors and associate professors and assistant professors. In addition, we also collaborate with the institutions on many projects. And more important, to an event like this, we provide a platform. As an example, tomorrow morning we are having a book discussion on a new book which has appeared on Sri Lanka, written by a very good young Sri Lankan strategic thinker, Asanga Abegunsekara, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow afternoon, a very detailed book on Aadhaar has come out by 2 senior journalists who did a lot of work on it, Charles Assisi and Ramnath. And we have the chairman of TRI and others to come and speak on it. This is just to give you a flavor of what kind of things we do. Basically, any issue of importance to contemporary India. Contemporary India is slightly broadly defined. Initially, it was only history, last 50 years, 100 years. Now we cover the whole gamut of activities, whether it's historical developments, political developments, social developments, and also India's place in the world. Because we can't divorce ourselves from the rest of the world. So things happening in China which have an impact on India as an example. Many other things. These are the kind of things that we are interested in. And either we organize it ourselves, and we have done some very good conferences recently. I can say very good from my own side because I didn't actually organize it. Our faculty did. We did a 2-day detailed seminar on India's role in World War I, where we had scholars from England, from France, other parts of the world. We also did a 2-day seminar on how the impact of colonialism on the development of the Indian legal system. So not just the system, but the Indian system of laws, colonialism and law. We also did a 1-day seminar for both this colonialism and this, we had people from all over the world. We did on the Anglo-Cookie War, a war which has been much forgotten, not remembered, and not known about very well. So we had a good full-day seminar on the Anglo-Cookie War, which happened in 1917-1918, which was a very rare occurrence, but unfortunately history is not kind to smaller places, so they get fallen by the wayside. Going forward, again, we'll be working on many different aspects. Example, one of the big projects we are doing now is to look at the systems of education in India at the beginning of the colonial period, whether the Sanskrit rolls or the madrasas, and what was the impact of colonialism on them in different parts of the country. The famous English collector of the South, Salem and Bellary, Monroe, had done a detailed study on it. He had reported how vibrant the system of education was. And Monroe's estimation was that most of India was functionally very literate in those days. However, in the course of the 19th century, what happened to them? So there's and from there to issues of governance today, which is why this book is being here. Because all of us are interested, hopefully, in what happens in this country at large, and interested in making things better. And therefore, when Dadoo came to me with the book that he's written, 100 Ideas, where he has picked up across the spectrum, many fields, and done a very short, precise kind of a point on it. What is it? What is the way forward? It's not, if you're looking at this as a point of view of departure for a larger systemic change, a book is not such a book. It actually takes up Chabahar. What is the way forward, as an example? And many such things on water, on food, and across the whole gamut of activities. We also do more detailed studies also. Looking at the health sector, we did a long study last year, which is in collaboration with Mr. Dhingra has left, the Forum of Federations of which Mr. Ravi Dhingra is to represent in Delhi. So we did with them also. Again, we had scholars from Brazil, from France, from Germany, from America, Canada, etc. to get ideas together, hopefully with a view to making a change at some time or the other. Would you like to now speak a bit on the book? Or would you ask No, I mean, normally what we do is the author speaks on the book, then the book is released. Since we have slightly reversed the schedule, I'll leave it to you. You're going to speak 5 minutes on the book and then we ask the panelists. I finished. I was a time filler, TV mein nahi aata tha, I was filling in just brief. And for those of you who are interested, please leave behind your email IDs. We have a mailing list of about 7,000. We'll be happy to make it 7,200. So you get to choose what program you come to. And you have no obligation to come to any program. But we hope to see more and more of you attending different programs. Yeah, that's why I'm asking Mr. Dadoo to speak. So.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister for Commerce, Industry and Civil Aviation. I worked with him only for 4 months, but I'm amazed and surprised that he's spoken so highly about me, and it brings a lot of humility as a result. He is one person who's receptive to new ideas, encourages out-of-the-box thinking, and I've experienced that. I've experienced this in the 4 months that I worked with him. I would also like to thank Mr. Shakti Sinha, the director, who was my director education 25 years ago when I was his additional director. Again, a man who pushes new ideas, and he's revolutionized this place which used to have a function once in 3 months. You have almost a book launch or a good speech almost every day now. Yadu is an old friend. Yadu is an old friend. We worked together 35 years ago in associated cement companies in Mumbai. And he, again, is one person who pushes new ideas very vigorously. Senior advocate Parag Tripathi, I think, is one of the most outstanding, creative, thinking advocates that I've ever met. One who delivers results in spite of great odds. I had the occasion to work with him for a Lakshadweep case, and I must tell you, in the most difficult circumstances, he got us out of it. So, thanks to Parag, I have another important, illustrious member on the panel. Mr. Professor Pant and I shared the board of IIFT. He's now the director of IIFT. Again, a great individual, a great economist, and is taking IIFT to new heights. So with this kind of a great panel, I can assure you, you'll have a great evening. Now let me just dwell a little on the book, because some people want to know why I wrote this book and what does it contain. Basically, it is an essence of my 35 years of service in the government. It covers all sectors of the economy, and it reflects my experience of working in 5 different union territories and 2 very long stints in the Government of India in the Ministry of Defense and Commerce. The predominance of the issues that you'll see in the book are from my last 7 years in Commerce and Textiles. And since Commerce had links with all ministries, because each ministry has either an import and an export angle, you'll find the range of subjects is very expansive. I was also fortunate, as one of the 10 joint secretaries in the Ministry of Commerce, to have worked as a link officer for the remaining 9, and therefore my familiarity with all products and all services and all territories with respect to foreign trade is acute, and therefore you find 9 ideas out of 100 on foreign trade. I was also AS and FA, Commerce and Textiles, and a few other ministries over a period of 3 years, and therefore you find 12 ideas on finance and 11 on infrastructure. I'm passionate about disruptive technologies, and therefore you'll see some very 9 bright ideas on new scientific discoveries. Then moving on to commerce. Commerce deals with retail. There are 5 ideas on retail, 5 ideas on ease of doing business, a similar number on agriculture and India's global role. We move on to almost every sector then. There are ideas on education and health, telecom and energy, railways, civil aviation, tourism. Secretary Tourism is here, I think. She was my boss. If she's still here, I'll be very happy that she hears what I have written. There are ideas on rural development, environment, women, sports, food, housing, media and entertainment, and also on litigation. So the book, therefore, covers almost every sector of the economy. The USP of the book is that each idea takes only a page and a half. So you can go to the content, select the idea that you like and read. And this, I think, will enable people to read the book in a better fashion. How do I see these 100 ideas? I'll group them into 3 categories. Some ideas are brand new, and I think will add tremendous value to society in general. There's an idea on glasses for the blind. There's an idea on customized shoes. There's an idea about which I'll speak a little more in detail about temple gold monetization. There's an idea on lab-grown diamonds. Many of you may not know that today we can create diamonds in the laboratory, which you cannot distinguish from the natural diamonds. There is an idea on public land inventory. The second group, I would say, are those ideas which have far-reaching consequences. For example, the use of sovereign wealth funds to create infrastructure. I discussed this idea with Secretary Economic Affairs, who's my batchmate, and he said, Dadoo, we are trying to implement all that you've written there. So that gives me a lot of satisfaction. There's one idea on facial recognition technology, in which China is the world leader today. Rooftop solar is another idea which I'll speak a little more in the next couple of minutes. The impact of 5G, how 5G will impact our lives is discussed here. And a wonderful experiment in Odisha on cross-subsidy in education, where 25,000 students are charged normal fees, and profits out of those 25,000 students' fees is used to give free education to another 25,000 people. I think an amazing experiment. You'll read about that in the book. Then there are still some other ideas which, if adopted in the country, will have serious positive consequences. These are on Global Happiness Index, City Livability Index, and Global Consumer Confidence Index. Now, as I mentioned, I'll discuss only two ideas here today because of want of time. These two ideas I had occasion to speak before the Honorable Prime Minister also, when he had gathered all additional secretaries and joint secretaries about 15 months ago for brainstorming. The first idea is on temple gold monetization. Now, those of you who are not familiar, India imports 600 tons of raw gold every year, spending about $30 billion in foreign exchange. $30 billion is a huge amount of money. It is almost 10% of the import bill of the country is used in import of gold. At the same time, we have 100 temples in this country which over centuries have accumulated 10,000 tons of gold as a stock. It's lying as a stock without any value attached to it in terms of its operationability. The annual donation of many of these 100 temples is about 100 crores, and 10% of that comes every year in terms of gold or silver. This gold is lying either in the temple vaults, like you have this famous Thiruvananthapuram Padmanabha temple, where 50,000 crores of wealth is lying there, or it is lying in bank vaults without any consequential economic benefit to the country. So what I am proposing is a 4-member high-powered committee chaired by a additional secretary or secretary Ministry of Finance, with members from SEBI, RBI and SBI, talking to each of these 100 temple trusts and convincing them to part with only 5 tons of gold every year. So if 100 temples part with 5 tons of gold every year, you'll have 500 tons of raw gold available within the country from the country's stock, which can then be converted into a flow. Imagine we would be saving nearly $25 to $30 billion every year if we can operationalize this. The only challenge would be that the income tax authorities cannot question the source of this gold. Because if it is a temple, we have to take it for granted that this gold is a donation. And if it is treated as a donation, then the challenge of valuing it from any other source for any other tax purposes will go. The second idea, which I again mentioned before the Honorable Prime Minister, and he asked me how operational can it be made, is about rooftop solar. Now, in India today, we have made rooftop solar worth about 850 megawatts only. That means 99.9% of all buildings in this country are still unutilized. The total target for solar production in this country, official target, is 40 gigawatts. Now, if you have to achieve a 40 gigawatt target, you have to have bright ideas, otherwise it's not possible to do this kind of a thing, because land is very expensive. Solar power may be cheap, but land is very expensive, and therefore it's not possible to actualize it. What I'm suggesting is that if all bus stands, railway stations, ports, airports, commercial and office establishments, farmhouses, temples, schools, colleges, universities, Army, Navy, Air Force complexes, if rooftop becomes the mission mode target to create power, then we can achieve this target very easily and very quickly. Why do I say this? An official study has been done for the town of Varanasi, where 676 megawatts of rooftop solar has been estimated as a potential which is viable. Now, if one town can give 676 megawatts, and we have 6,000 block headquarter towns with a population of more than 1 lakh, you can well imagine the total possibility and the total scope of rooftop solar in this country. If we can do this, our entire dependence on thermal power and nuclear power, both of which are not sustainable in terms of environment, can completely go. The long-term costs of solar power have equaled thermal power already, and with new solar panels, this will drop down further. There are two excellent examples in Delhi of rooftop solar. There's GMC College, which I had initiated when my daughter was studying there, and Jamia Millia Islamia, which has also done great work in this. The other great example is Kochi Airport. The entire airport is run on solar energy. Well, these are the two ideas which I wanted to discuss in detail. There's a very distinguished panel. I'm sure you'll benefit from this. I thank all the members of this august audience who've spent their time and effort to come here. I thank all the distinguished panelists who've taken time out and have been delayed beyond their scope of limits. And I thank the director who has opened the entire museum and library for this purpose. All his staff who have helped us a lot. And I'll be failing in my duty if I don't thank the publisher, Crossword, Anup, wherever he is, right here, and his staff, who have ensured that the book comes out in full steam and gets circulated all over the 5,000 stores in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we ask the panelists to speak, I'd just like to, for those of you who have friends, family members outside who want to sit anywhere, who want to listen into this program or watch this program, we are on Facebook Live just now. In fact, I was watching it when Dadoo was speaking. We do that for all our programs, actually. And then we later post it also on our own website. And of course, we post it on YouTube. So may I now request, should I go in this line? Okay. Yaduvendra, Mathur, NITI Aayog, the think tank of the government.
Thank you. First of all, it's an honor for me. JK Saab, Mr. Dadoo is the inspiration that got me to actually write the civil services. So he is at source of a lot of my own transformation. And way back in Mumbai, we were sharing a same apartment, working in the same company. We were both recruited together. And then he took the civil service exam and he joined. Then I asked him, hey, what does it take to get into the civil services? So, it's such an honor for me to be asked by him to be here this afternoon. Without much ado, I will come straight to, I got a copy of this book a little before some of you, because I actually went through the book and I read the ideas. And it's an amazing compilation. It was like Mr. Dadoo was covering, he's covered the entire gamut, 24 areas, and he's scanned through, very good. He's picked up the very right issues, and like he was giving us a rundown of something which is very innovative, never thought of before. So completely brilliant ideas. And he acknowledged in his book earlier on about the impact Edward de Bono made on him and his creative writing. And you say that up front. And that is one book many of us did read years ago. But maybe we didn't use it the way Mr. Dadoo has used it. And the word po, if I remember, a word you use which is, disruptive, it means nothing, but it generates ideas about how do you solve a problem. So in governance, in government, like the minister was mentioning, there are challenges, problems, and there are people who want to think through what could be the innovative way, disruptive way to, get around, wrap your head around the problems. We have the secretary, DRPG, Mr. Eapen was here, and every year the government of India gives awards to civil servants and in public administration on great implementation, great ideas that get implemented. So I think the issue really is, how do you nurture a whole generation of people involved in public life, because that's where governance is about, and how do they look at the same problems in a new, innovative way, which is implementable, and it conforms to the law of the land. So the space is there, and that disruption is coming through an institution like a NITI Aayog, where I'm fortunate to be working over the last 18 months. And I think a book like this is a kind of a must read for all the interns and the young professionals and everybody in NITI Aayog. So, and we keep getting a lot of ideas, Dadoo Saab, just the way you have shared these 100 ideas. So I can assure you that all these 100 ideas would be looked at within NITI by the teams. And some of those ideas which you have written about at different stages are being worked on. Like the gold monetization idea of the temple gold did go through a committee set up a couple of months ago. In fact, in February 18, Mr. Ratan Vatal, he chaired a committee on gold. He's the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. And I was just sharing with Mr. Tripathi about what when you were mentioning about the gold of the temple, and how we could use gold which is lying as stock and not as flow, what you write in your idea. So exactly some of these things are being looked at, and when it comes into a book like yours, then many, many young kids and others will get to read about it, and they'll come out with solutions, and a public policy dialogue begins around these ideas. So if it is only coming in from a government report that you want to touch the temple gold, it has a different connotation. But it is when the public society, and this comes out into the academia, the very distinguished academia here. So if they also take on ideas, they criticize, I'm sure your book will also be criticized. There will be some ideas that you have thrown that people would write back to you or talk to you that, hey, what you said is not doable, or what was tried out. So I think the churning will begin, and I think that's the purpose of the book that you've written, that it churns ideas. Many civil servants will read, your friends, your colleagues, your seniors, juniors are around. So I think it's a very powerful statement, picking up ideas, putting it into a book, and then seeing what next. Maybe you could come up with follow-up on what of your ideas that you yourself think they're not doable. Like, say, factoring you were writing. And factoring, I know I was chairman of Exim Bank, and I know we were struggling to get the factoring market going. And it's not a new idea. It's been around for decades. But it's not taking off. So what's missing? So while the idea is great, we need to move one step further to go deep in what's missing on the factoring space. You mentioned about AI. I'm very happy to share here that Mr. Dadoo with some of his colleagues, Sandeep from Fractal, I don't know if Sandeep is there. Yeah, there's Sandeep. So I know that Mr. Dadoo is engaging with some of his other friends and bringing AI applications into the real world. And over the last couple of months, with NITI Aayog, we've been trying to create a space when an algorithm can actually go down and read the digital X-rays to make India TB free. That's the national mission. To India should become TB free by 2025. It won't happen unless we get 100% screening of every Indian. And if they're screened, and then the algorithm gets trained by looking at the digital X-ray. And it can detect not only TB, but I think 12 other chest diseases. So the only way that algorithm will become reliable is it gets hundreds and millions of X-rays to actually get the data to drive, because that's when an AI, artificial intelligence application will get medical recognition. So Mr. Dadoo is not only putting these ideas in a book, but is actually seeing that some of them are grounded. So I think that is the connect which a person of your status and your vision, that not only are you ideating, but I can see some of your ideas, you're trying to put them down on the ground so that it impacts people. And I wish you all the best for your career as a distinguished author. I know it's a long road, but I wish you all the best, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Just two people left. Mr. Pragat.
As desired by a clear majority of one at least. Yeah.
You believe in the dictum, silence is consent.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, long ago the great judge Oliver Wendell Holmes had said that every idea is an incitement. These 100 ideas are 100 incitements. Ideas are like nuclear energy. They have to be tamed to be utilized. Otherwise, they can create chaos. That taming and utilization, my good friend Mr. Dadoo teaches us in this beautiful book. And that taming and utilization comes from his very holistic concept of ideation. Ideation is creative process of lateral thinking where you generate, develop, create new ideas to subserve social good. The last part I have added to distinguish it from just creating, generating and developing ideas, but his ideation, or if we may call it the Mr. Dadoo version of ideation, is to subserve public good. And that is where this is a cutting edge work, because it tells us so much in 2 pages each of so many things which can be done. It's actually mind-boggling. In a lighter vein, you can say, what an ideation, Sarji. It is. You begin with drones. The advantages of drones, from medical treatment, communication of information, reaching out food, reaching out protection to victims of disasters, it's endless. Tourism. Cross-subsidy on education he has already dealt with. He has dealt with things like city livability index. That's why most of the time I was Googling. I wasn't Googling ideally. I was Googling to find out the various ideas, explosive ideas he has put in the book to find out what they are. And each time I was rewarded. So you have, then he deals with research and development in semiconductor chip designs. I'll give you one example which was amazing. He said, tap the Olympic medals. Now, how do you do it? He says, well, you have 6,000 tehsildars. We all know that. So he says each tehsildar should be told to pick up 3 bright people, 3 good people with a potential to do well in Olympic sports. So you got 18,000 people, young boys and girls. Then you prune it down at the level of the district magistrate. So he brings it down to 1,800 throughout India, not just one DM, all the DMs. So you bring them down to that 1%, finding, yes, this is the real potential. It's like how a pharmaceutical firm would deal with which one to patent. So you got 50 possible ways out of a particular cancer or Alzheimer's disease. And you choose that, well, these are the 10 promising aspects where I can really strike gold. So then you're down to 1,800. And then you go up to the level of chief secretary, and you bring it down to 1 per district. So you have 700 representatives of 700 districts. There's an element of distributive justice here. There's also an element of picking up people who otherwise will never come in the mainstream, never think about being in the Olympics, because they don't afford it, most of them. At that point, he says, bring in the Sports Authority of India, 1 crore per such athlete. 700 crores is peanuts if you look at the global picture. And then see how it works. Now, this is actually a fabulous idea. This is actually beyond an idea. It's ideation. Now, it's always been said that the duty of a citizen, ultimately, is speaking truth to power. What my good friend Mr. Dadoo does is, he speaks ideation to power, which is very important. Because often power, whichever may be the political hue of the power, doesn't matter. Often power will tell you, we know it all, young man. There's nothing for you to tell us. But if you keep on speaking enough, and you keep on speaking with the conviction, sooner or later, somebody or the other will say, let's give it a shot. And that is how the situation changes. That is how new thinking comes in. That is how growth and development takes place. In the end, I would close with a very nice couplet of my favorite language, which is Urdu, which is, हजारों साल नरगिस अपनी बेनूरी पे रोती है, बहुत मुश्किल से होते हैं चमन में दीदावर पैदा, The Nargis is sitting right here. And the Didaverse is all of you. So you are the ones who have to take this ideation forward and make it a complete success. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I can see when Dadoo said you're a very good, at top class lawyer, we knew what he meant. Now request Mr. Manoj Pant to address us.
As Dadoo said, I first met Mr. Dadoo, or JK as I call him, late 90s when he was secretary in Goa government. And we had occasion to have dinner together. And when I first time I realized that he had a lot of academic interest. He was then also teaching in the Goa Institute, right, management, and we shared a lot of notes. After now I come from a slightly different perspective as compared to the previous speakers, one of whom was a bureaucrat, is a bureaucrat, the other is a lawyer, and I'm an economist. Now, when I quickly read through this book, the first impression which comes to me is of a bureaucrat who sees so many things that are not happening. You know, whether it is in the area of finance, or trade, or infrastructure details, so many things that could be done. And some of his ideas, a couple I think Mr. Tripathi already mentioned, I found very useful to look at. But I, as an academic, instead of simply telling you how useful this book is, it is. It's a great book to just browse through, you know, and say, okay, so what's the main problem areas in infrastructure? And here's a quick one-page, you know, ready reckoner about the areas. I would suggest to him where he would take it forward. And that's really what I think he has called me here for. And my first thing is because, you know, he's shown so much experience and obviously having served in various capacities at different levels in the government in many of the areas. What doesn't come out to me so easily over here, so what should I do? You know, is it, for example, let me take an example. Take the case, and very rightly mentioned, which I think is a top priority today in the government, skilling. It's been around for generations, right? And to me, the fault I think lies today, that doesn't come out so clearly here, is not that the idea of reskilling should be there, but why hasn't it worked? Is it for the first time there is suddenly life there needs to be skilling? I think it's the assumption that the government will do the reskilling. That to me is the biggest failure. And I do say, I must mention, aside on the minister, I've encountered a number of occasions in IIFT. He's very perspective, you know, very perceptive in his things. And here the separation of government and governance is very important. To me, one of the first things that seems to come out is that as if the government can do all these things, and they can't. And therefore, the book doesn't show me, so what should I do? You know, if you go through the history, let me take a small example which is not mentioned here. Take the example of this Brahmaputra. It's been flooding for centuries. And it still does. And the solution has been, how do I stop the Brahmaputra? Instead of channelizing it, I'm glad that the waterway is coming up. It's saying, let's channel it. How do I stop it? Can you stop a natural force? You can't. As a consequence, the amount of money that has been spent on Brahmaputra, various Brahmaputra boards from 1950 to today, probably would have been enough to start a new city in India. And yet nothing has changed. I think the assumption being that the government is not a solver of problems. The government is a facilitator for solving a problem. And here what I would have liked him, and he knows it very well, in his next thing, is to go to the next phase of the 100 ideas and say, so what's the priorities? Can I prioritize? The first thing any developing country must do is prioritize. Let me tell you what my view is. If you ask me, what is the one thing that this government has done in 4.5 years, this is not a political statement. It's an economist speaking, right? I don't belong to any political party. What is the best thing they've done? And I would say number 5 in finance, the insolvency and bankruptcy code. It's about the best measure. It takes a long time to implement. It's extremely important. And forget all the political haranguing back and forth. You will see the NPAs declining largely if this is properly implemented. So here are 2 issues. What's the priority item to you as a bureaucrat in the governance of the country? And secondly, what is the problem implementation? There are so many laws in this country. My friend Vivek, one of the brightest minds I know, has done some excellent work. I never knew that it's illegal to mix water in milk, but you can put milk in water. It's an old British law. And, Vivek is a great guy to call about these gems, about these stupid gems and silly gems which governments after governments keep putting, thinking that laws are going to make people. So I would have liked to see a follow-up saying, here are priorities out of these 100 excellent ideas which I put forward. Why are they priorities? And third, most important, why are they not implemented? Many governments have these laws, and I think you will find it's mostly because government thinks the best way to implement a law is to bring a new law, how to implement the old law. Finally, let me end. Don't want to spend too long. Everyone's in a hurry to leave. So am I, actually. But let me say this third thing I would like to do is, it is not, one would get the feeling as if you can compartmentalize these areas. You can't. For example, I understand you have, as a bureaucrat, having looked at them from a very, if you want to call it, departmental approach. Finance, foreign trade, infrastructure, retail. But in the real world, governance doesn't work like that. And I'll give you an example. You've talked about foreign trade. One aspect of it is factoring. It's a bit like discounting of checks, right? And you have export facilitation, Indo-US trade, gold, and so on. But the next thing, infrastructure, what's the link? Can I do trade today without logistics? Logistics, the LPI index we all know about now, is the crucial thing. I mean, if I can make something and I can't get to the port, I might as well not have made it in the first place, right? So where is the constraints? And again, what's the implementation? So is it a problem of export that we are useless, we can't make anything, which is not entirely untrue. But apart from that, is it that we can't get it to the port? So are we wasting too much money trying to get people to export, but the problem is I can't get it to the port? Then why am I wasting so much money doing it? So where is the implementation problem from a bureaucrat's perspective? And therefore, where the need to reduce governance? By the way, saying some good governance does not always mean how to increase it. Sometimes reducing governance is very, very good governance. And that might be an excellent suggestion to come from... So if I want to, you ask me to summarize, I would say first, this is an excellent way to start. Get people to understand that these are 100 ideas which any simple person, and that's very important, can understand. Then let's say, okay, so what are the priorities for me? So if I'm going to say trade, then what is the priority in trade? Is it technology? And I'm going to mention 2 minutes on that. You mentioned 2 things which I've read. One is 3D technology. The other is, of course, I think, one more issue you mentioned, a couple of other issues you mentioned, technology-wise. You mentioned somewhere technology. You're absolutely right. Today, there is a understanding that the reason we can't export is because we don't export enough labor-intensive goods. It's completely untrue. The reality of empirical evidence I know of is that the most important factor determining exports is technology. But what happens if you bring in the technology and you can't promote employment, then what happens? What do people do who are unemployed? Because remember, at base, governance is all about economics, right? And economics is all about political economy. How do I implement an economic issue and make sure that I have taken the people with me? Without that's useless. It won't happen. It doesn't work anyway. Now, this part of how do I take a balance between technology and let's say the political reality is a very crucial thing. 3D has come into the West. I spent a long time there studying and working because of labor shortage. But that's not your problem. So then what's going to happen? Should the government ask people to do 3D? Why? Why would I as industrialist ever take up 3D technology? It's probably cheaper for me to import it. Why would I do it when labor is so cheap? Similarly, skilling. What is the problem today? We have plenty of labor, but as we economists say, it is not that we don't have enough labor, but we have completely skillless labor. We don't have unskilled, but skillless labor. No one has skills in any particular task. Unskilled only means skilled in a particular task. So I would suggest the next absolute follow-up book should be, here are my 100 ideas. Now let me get priorities and let's take each one of them and find out from the bureaucratic point of view, from the administrative point of view, what seems to be the lacuna in implementation in terms of particularly of getting non-governmental, maybe even the market to deliver. But I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Dadoo.
Thank you very much. Can I decide as the chair? Thank you. Because I have a question too. Two things I think, one I briefly mentioned to you, and the other is the shipping thing. So I've done some work on shipping. And the turnaround time has actually fallen a lot in Indian ports. To the extent that our ports today are really begging for business, with the capacity accretion has been so much more. And the average turnaround time last year had fallen to 58 hours from 72 hours a year ago, and it used to be well over 100 hours 10 years ago, So in that sense, you have mentioned it has gone up. I don't know where that figure came from. Other is on the rooftop solar. Is that rooftop solar is a very good thing. We ourselves have it. But on a large scale, as Germany found out about 4 years ago, when there's a strong, bright, sunny day, your system can trip because of the surge in supply. So unless Mr. Elon Musk comes up with much, much better and bigger batteries in the real sense of the term, efficient batteries which don't occupy a football field. Solar is a very good thing. You're right to promote it, but there are limitations in terms of the capacities. Let's take two more quick questions. A question there and a question there before we lose all the audience. Yes, please.
My name is Dr. Sunil Mago. Sir, it's a beautiful work. 100 ideas to improve governance in India when there are 1,000 ideas for non-governance. So it's really a welcome step. Two quick points which I would like to mention is this. You're talking about gold monetization. I have a different view, sir. Different view in the sense that there is some istridhar. And every household in India is run by the ladies. You touch their gold, they will teach you a lesson. Similarly, this gold belongs to the deities, so it should not be tickled with. Now, second point which you mentioned was this solar energy. This need of the hour. As you mentioned that you have in your idea mentioned that it can be used in the bus stands and all that. I think you should add the Waqf board land also, which is available in abundance. Whenever we have to take a step, we talk of taking money and gold from temples. Do we have the courage to go to the Waqf board and take their land to develop the infrastructure? Those are the two things. Thank you very much.
Sir, I'm K. Mahesh, and I have been a student of Mr. Dadoo in the UTCS who taught us economics, and he was my boss. And it's really a privilege and honor to be in his book release function. You see, a professor is good in reflection, and a civil servant is good in action. And Mr. Dadoo combines the action of a civil servant and the reflection of a professor. And so is Mr. Shakti Sinha as director of the Nehru Memorial Museum. Sir, it's a great book, 100 Ideas to Improve Governance in India. We have Mr. Pant who said we need to prioritize. But in my view, the key issue is how do you implement the ideas? Can you implement these ideas in absence of civil services reforms? You do not have a selection process where the qualities which is needed to be a civil servant and the qualities tested, there's a disconnect. The issues of training, the issues of tenure, the lack of specialization, post-retirement rehabilitation of civil servants leading to conflict of interest. There's a whole lot of problems. Government is a subset in governance. You have the corporate governance, you have the NGO governance. So until unless can we implement these ideas without reforming the civil services and in absence of corruption in this country? Thank you.
To take Director Shakti Sinha's question first, it's absolutely correct that dwell time in most of our ports have gone down substantially. But still there are ports like Chittagong, there are other ports, I don't want to mention names, where things are still very bad. The point I'm trying to make is, while Krishnapatnam and JNPT latest berthing facilities are excellent, there are still some ports which are dragging our import and exports very substantially. And therefore, if we can, I've had a chat with Secretary Shipping before coming here, and he agrees that we need to create uniform systems in all the ports so that we are able to generally improve our dwell time facility everywhere. As regards your point about solar rooftop and how long can it last, I can assure you that there are batteries today, lithium-ion batteries, which can store energy very, very powerfully and store up to 5 years of guarantee. I am dealing with a company which makes solar home systems, and the lithium-ion battery there has a 5-year guarantee. You charge it for 6 hours, then continues for nearly 56 hours. So today, if we can create solar rooftop systems where the battery where the battery gets charged for 12 hours of sunshine or 8 hours of sunshine, it would last the whole night. The only problem will be for 2 winter months where we won't have that facility, and some kind of a backup would be required. But I assure you, sir, that I see a day clearly when thermal and nuclear power, being not environmentally sustainable, will go down very heavily, and you will find solar power and wind power taking ascendancy very, very effectively. On the issue of gold monetization and deities, while I agree with what you're saying in terms of emotional connect, the point is that you can't afford to spend $30 billion every year importing gold when we have adequate stock of this gold lying in our temples, in vaults, doing nothing. This gold is not lying with the deities, it's lying with the vaults in the banks and the temples. In fact, a study which was done by CAG for the Padmanabha temple in Trivandrum found a lot of gold was missing from there. So instead of having or giving such amount of golds to the temple authorities and worrying about what will happen to that, monetization of that gold, converting that stock into a flow, can fuel this economy very, very substantially and very, very effectively. On the issue of solar rooftop, Waqf board land, if we can get, very good, but we have adequate land in all the areas which I mentioned, which can be effectively used for solar rooftop. As I mentioned, for Varanasi, an expert study was done. 676 megawatts was the calculation. And mind you, as I mentioned, we've all worked in rural areas. There are 6,000 block headquarter towns with a population of 1 lakh. If each of these towns can be made rooftop, we will not need any thermal or nuclear energy. On Mahesh's point of prioritizing, I agree with Professor Pant and you. Prioritization is important. But I tell you, you scratch the surface of any of these ideas, and if they can be implemented, it will lead to tremendous results. So while prioritization is very important, any of these ideas, if they are implemented, I feel will have substantial benefit. On your issue of civil services reform, I think the present government is trying to do a lot. Let's see how it works. But I don't believe that our generation of civil servants were the best and the younger generation are the worst. I don't believe that. Today's civil servants are tremendously equipped with latest technology, know a lot more than what we did at our time, And therefore, we should never grudge the younger generation about their competence, capability, or even their intentions. You know, they come through the same difficult exam. Now 13 lakh students write the exam. During our time, 3 lakh students were writing the exam for 180 seats. Now 13 lakh students are writing. So let's not denigrate the present lot, but we need to do better training, better knowledge of finance, better knowledge of computers, better knowledge of law. I think these are 3 ingredients in a civil servant which are probably not taught to the extent that they are required to be taught in Mussoorie, and therefore they need to be equipped or re-skilled through the course of their life in the government. Thank you.
Brings us to the end. And now request... Okay, one last question.
I am Dr. Rajni Raman. I am a retired agriculture scientist from the Indian Agriculture Research Institute. My reaction is the skilling. The skill development, we have a lot of big advertisements for every ministry, but when we go very practically, we do not get people at all. People are just doing the same type of masonry work and plumbing work without any proper training. This skill development has to be done in the lowest level of the village, the panchayat level, and that the Tahsildar and all should be totally involved with the skill development. Otherwise, just advertisement in ministries, they don't reach the people who need the skills needed. Because I have been working in the agriculture sector, I know how people have been working. The second point about the gold. The moment you talk about taking gold from the temples, it will be another Sabarimala problem. So it is better we do not attack things. We have to go in a very different way, because suddenly activists will come, they will forget the religious principles, then it will lead to more and more violence. Thank you.
Thank you for your very good points. And now request our publisher to come up. Actually, if you want the government to do skilling, as Manoj says, I will be very worried. Then the government can handle the gold also. So I hope that the government does not handle the gold except on a voluntary basis. But my fear is the moment you tell government you can't take this gold, is accessible, I get a little nervous.
Hello, good evening everyone. My name is Anup Jirajani, and we are the publishers of J.K. Dadoo's book, 100 Ideas to Improve Governance. And it's a young publishing house called The Right Place, and it's an initiative of Crossword Bookstores. On behalf of Crossword Bookstores, Right Place, and of course the author J.K. Dadoo, I take this opportunity to thank Honorable Minister who took out his time to be present here, and Shakti Sinhaji who opened the doors for this beautiful venue for such a fabulous event. Professor Pant for his insights on the book, and I'm sorry I missed out the name of the gentleman who just left. I wanted to take his name, but I realized it's Mr. Mathur sitting in that place. So sorry for that. So I also thank everybody who was present here today. And there's a small memento, a book published by The Right Place, which I would like to give as a memento to the distinguished panelist on the stage.
Thank you.